Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. Today we continue our music theory series right here, BusyWorksBeats.com/music theory. If you're new here, subscribe, like the video. Let's continue on. But today I promise to show you how to write R&B chords inside of FL Studio. You can do this in any DAW. This music theory can apply to all, whether you're playing on a piano, in a DAW, it applies everywhere. So let's hop into the DAW and get started. Okay, so the first thing about R&B chords is you're going to be using what are called chord extensions for the most part. So let's first start off with writing what's called a scale. Now we're going back to the basics because everything derives from the basics. Okay, so let's first start with writing out a scale. So a scale is just a sequence of notes that sound good. We're going to start with the scale called the minor natural scale, the natural minor scale. Okay, now it has a sequence of whole steps and half steps. You don't need to memorize any of this stuff. Just go to your chord stamp here in FL Studio. Go to where it says minor natural. Click on that and just click your root note or wherever you want to begin that sequence of notes. Let's just start at C to keep this super simple and easy. Okay, so we're starting at C. Now the notes are it's whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. You don't need to memorize what I'm saying. We go over all this stuff though in our music theory essentials. We break it down. But essentially, a whole step is 2 notes away. A half step is 1 note away. So you would start at your root note, in this case, wherever you decide. This is C, in this case. And then a whole step, we just complete a code. Every scale has a code. We teach all this stuff, again, in our music theory essentials. So the natural minor scale has a whole step, which is 2 notes away, then a half step, which is 1 note away, then a whole step. The easy way to look at this in your DAW is, does it have a gap or not? A gap means whole step. No gap means half step. So it's whole step, which is a gap, half step, which is no gap, whole step. Then from there, it's whole step, half step, whole step, and then back again to whole step. So that's how you complete a scale. Don't memorize that stuff. You'll get used to it based on the instrument you play. You can kind of visually see the notes once you start playing the keyboard. It's more of a visual thing than it is a typing in the keyboard type of thing. Okay, once you have those notes mapped out, let's map out our chords. So you can play chords within a scale. These are called scale degrees. So for example, if I start at the first, this is the first note of the scale. If I talk about the second, that's the second note within the scale. The third is the third note within the scale. The fourth is the fourth note, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. You can just keep going on and on and on. Okay, but that's how they get up to these chords called the minor ninth, the minor 11th. You're like, okay, if there's only 7 notes in a chord, how do I make a ninth chord? And that's because we're extending the chord beyond just that root note. We're continuing the pattern. Okay, so let's start off with a nice R&B chord. Let's click on C. Now, what I like to do is keep this scale reference to the side. And this helps me visually see because in FL Studio, they label the notes. So it makes it super easy to see where you are. Okay. Now let's start at C. And again, you can start anywhere you want. Now to make chords in a scale, you simply skip every other note within the scale. So if I'm starting at C, I'm going to skip D, go to D sharp, skip F, go to G. Okay. So this gives us our first triad chord. Now, if you dig into the real definition of a chord, it's actually 2 notes or more, but I don't want to get into complexity with you. So we'll call these triads a 3-note chord, like trident gum or like a trident spear. Okay, so it's starting at C, skip every other note within the scale. So skip D, go to D, E flat technically, skip F, go to G. Okay, now you play all these 3 together and that creates what's called a triad. Starting at our root note, which is C. Let me pull this up 1 octave. Okay, so the definition of this chord we would look at what we call chord codes. So to map this out, I would start at the root note and I say this is the 0 point. Okay, so we're using definitive number with no suffix at the end. So when I say 0, 1, 2, 3, I'm not talking about scale degrees. Scale degrees are first, second, third, fourth. It has an ending to it. When I say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm talking about semitone values. So the chord code here is 0, 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6, 7. 0, 3, 7 makes up a minor chord no matter where you are on the keyboard. Okay, so that's the DNA of a minor chord. So we teach chord codes at BusyWorksBeats.com and we teach traditional music theory and how to kind of accelerate through traditional music theory using chord codes. So again, that's at premium.busyworksbeats.com, all our course stuff. Okay, so now we have this. So this is C minor triad. Now, what R&B folks do is they extend this chord. So again, the key is skipping every other note within the scale. So go from C, skip D, go to E flat, skip F, go to G, skip A flat, go to B flat. That's our next note in this chord. And you just keep doing this until you map out the notes that you want. Now, where the nomenclature comes from is, again, if you talk about scale degrees, which is a Roman system, numeral system, we're starting at C. That's the first. Then the second note in the scale is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. So the way I name these chords is based on how far of a chord extension I'm doing. So for example, B flat in this case is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So I'm adding that seventh on top of what's called that minor triad. Okay, so if you want to get technical, the minor triad consists of the root note or the tonic, the third, the fifth, and the seventh. You don't need to memorize that. Chord codes makes it a lot more easy to write chords without memorizing scales and scale degrees. The problem with traditional music theory, this is a side note, is that when you learn scales first and you build chords from a scale, me telling you the first, the third, and the fifth doesn't make sense because you don't know what scale you have to start with. That means you have to memorize a scale, which takes so much time. So chord codes get straight to the point and give you a chord on demand. Okay, so let's continue here. So this is called a seventh chord for the reason that seventh is up top. Now let's skip the eighth and let's go to the ninth, which is D. So now we're creating a C minor ninth chord. It's called minor because of that first triad. And that's what it sounds like. Okay, but R&B takes it even further. So it's more than just ninth chords. Let's go to the 11th. So now starting off at D, we're going to skip E flat, go to F. Now I'm playing these chords in a very bland way. Now R&B plays these in, different ways. Maybe different octaves as well. I found that once you go to the ninth chords and the 11th chords, it's probably best you stay in the lower octaves. It's not a hard rule, it just sounds better, in my opinion. Okay, so that's an 11th chord. Now let's say you want to make a 13th chord, which is a thing. We're going to copy every note from the ninth chord, copy that over. Instead of adding the 11th here, we're going to add the 13th. So again, we're skipping every other note within the scale. Start from F, skip G, go to A flat. That would be your 13th of the scale. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. Now it sounds weird up top, but it's a nice kind of our ear wants to hear those tones. Okay, so now that we have this, I like to teach from this point. Your brain is telling you the tone that you're listening to. This is what we teach in our more advanced music theory courses. Again, that's at premium.busyworksbeats.com. So for example, our ear is listening to the top note of a chord. Now my ear wants to hear dun. Okay, so the question is, if you don't know what chord to put next, start with the note that you hear in your head, like dun, dun, dun. Okay, and then you can fill out the chord underneath. So now let's use that simple technique of just grabbing that top note and skipping every other note, going down this time. So instead of going up, we're going to go down. Okay, so let's skip F, go to D sharp, or E flat in this case. Skip D, go to C. Skip B flat, go to A flat. Skip G, go to F. And this is starting to make those thick chords that we called, in this case, this is a ninth chord. Whenever you have 5 notes in it, it's probably a ninth chord. Now that's not a hard rule. I'm just kind of giving you the quick way to navigate. Now the question is, do you like that chord or do you not like that chord? If the answer is yes, then keep this chord type. If the answer is no, then maybe you want that top note, but it's just not the right chord underneath. So I'll show you a different way of thinking about this. So let's say you like the chord, but you want to add D in here. But the problem is this will make this what, a first, third, fifth, seventh, ninth, and then we go to, this will make that an 11th chord played straight out. So the D adds a dissonance that I don't like. So technically we're going to stick with this chord. So let me show you other ways you can harmonize that note. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of advanced music theory just to show you how far you can take it. You don't have to use these rules. Okay, so don't use these as like hard rules. These are just ways to solve problems that you may have. So let me copy this entire chord over. Now we're going to get into what are called altered chords. So altered chords are where you have a bass chord type. In this case, we have a minor ninth chord, but then we change notes within the chord. Okay, so it's like, it's going to be written as minor ninth flat, 5, or minor ninth sharp, whatever. Okay, so it's just if you raise a note or if you drop the note. So let's determine what note we want to drop. So you see how I just dun, dun, that adds a bluesy tone when you go from one note directly to the next. Okay, so whenever you use those half steps, it starts introducing that bluesy feel. So I went from, in this case, E flat down to D. So the question is, what did I change about this chord? Okay, and this is where the nomenclature comes into play. So if I were to write this out, outside of just me realizing that it's really just a D, what is it? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's diminished. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that's diminished. If I rearrange this and figured out a different name for it, we can give it a different name. But for now, I'm just going to call it a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's a minor triad. And then we have our, what is this? Our seventh was flattened. So it's a flat 7. Okay. And then we're playing, it's confusing when you try to make it music theory in ease, because that's what makes it confusing. Okay. So this is the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th. So we're playing a minor ninth chord, but the 7th is lowered one note. So we call that flat 7. So minor ninth, flat 7. Okay, so R&B is not played just very stale. Boom, boom, boom. It's just not played that stale. So a couple techniques you could use, and I'll leave you off with this. You can, I call these like glide notes or slide notes. Technically, it has an Italian name, but we don't want to bore you to tears with old names. So I'm going to slide those notes up. So it goes bring. Okay, so it's a simple technique. Just add a note below. Usually the next note down within the scale. Doesn't have to be. It can be a half step. See how it just bring, ding. Or you can play strum style, which is Alt S in FL Studio. And then you would take out this note. And you would play this more human. See how it gives it a different vibe when you strum the notes? Now, again, this is not the perfect strum, but much different vibe when you play it slowly across the notes as opposed to all at once. Okay, so there's different playing styles for R&B as well. But I wanted to show you extended chords. I wanted to show you altered chords. And, the last thing I'll show you today, this is like a bonus. So if you like this bonus, just smash the like button, subscribe if you're new. We're going to get into a bonus. So let me Control Z my way back to where we were at the basic chords, just so it's easier to read. And one thing they love about R&B is a turnaround chord or a passing chord. So what we'll do is we'll add in a chord here. So I'm going to add this note right here, and then we're going to create a passing chord to make it pull away and then pull back into the storyline. So passing chords or borrowed chords, depending on how you use them, they're basically chords from another scale or a chord that you just insert into the chord progression and it just works. Okay, so it's not in the scale. So this is where you would leave the scale and then come back to the scale. So a simple chord turnaround is a diminished chord, for example. 036 is the chord code. So in this case, I would assume that this note is the top note of the chord, the diminished chord. So now let's pull this. So it'd be 6, 5, 4, 3. So I'm working backwards now. 2, 1, 0. That creates a diminished chord. Now, diminished chords, I used to hate them until I learned how to voice them. So right now, this is the regular voicing for a diminished chord. See how it just sounds proper in R&B? So what I'm going to do to make this more like R&B, I'm going to make these notes overlap a little bit. And then turn the velocity down a little bit. You don't need to worry about technique right now. Okay, so to make this a little more pleasing, let's strum this out. Strum just this chord type. Okay, the strum is a little heavy. Let's pull this back a little bit. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to voice this and which notes you want to overlap. I think it's probably best we leave it. But once you go dun, dun, and you take away all those bass notes, it just leaves that frequency gap. So we would have to take time to voice that and which notes overlap. But also, if it gets too dense in your diminished chord, you could take that third and just pull it down an octave. So it's less, you don't really understand that it's dissonant. You know it's something about it, but you can't tell because we moved the G so far away from the chord type. I know I'm speaking advanced music theory and ease, but I'm just showing you how to voice a chord so that it's not so frequency dense. Let's pull this up an octave, control up. So that's how you get those in-between emotions, that emotional sound. Now, the last thing I'll show you, I know this is a lot of bonus material, but you can collapse chords, I call it. So you can move the notes of a chord around. You could pull them down or up an octave. So I'm going to pull all these top notes down, control down. Now this sounds crazy because now we lost that top melody note. Now, I probably wouldn't add this right at that timing. Let's do. My ear wants to hear it. Let's pull this down an octave, control down. And then my ear wants to hear again. Okay. So what I'm doing is just listening to my ear and what that top note wants to be. And then I'm revoicing everything below that point so that this is the top note. Now this may sound crazy. So this is another technique in R&B. They use a lot of constant notes where that top note doesn't really change. So let's move this note away so it's not so conflicting. Let's pull it down an octave. Okay, so that's how you would get that vibe. Now, R&B is way more than just the chords. It's the sound selection. It's the way the sound actually moves. There's a lot to R&B, but that's the gist of the music theory as to how you get it to sound more soulful. Okay, so if you want to learn more, just go to our website. Go to premium.busyworksbeats.com. We have free courses. We have paid courses. Just however deep you want to go into music production and music theory, we have stuff for you. Just go to premium.busyworksbeats.com. I'll link the Music Theory Essentials course below. But again, we have a lot of free courses as well. So go check it out. It's Game from busyworksbeats.com. Subscribe if you're new. Peace.